Okay, so we are here on the phone with Dr. Hannah Solomon. I've told you a little bit about her and the work she's doing about nasal congestion. As a matter of fact, the information I shared with you about complementary medicine is some information that she gave me. And she's right now on the phone. I'm calling her in her home base, Missouri, and she's in Columbia, Missouri. And we are all very thankful that she's giving us the time to share the importance of doing the nasal cleansings. So, first of all, Dr. Solomon, I really want to, Dr. Hannah, I want to thank you for accepting this interview today. And
pleasure.
I want to start asking you, how does the sinus project start on anybody? I mean, why do we get sinus projects?
Good question. You know, the way that the sinuses are built in our head, it's actually a closed cavity, like a cave. It's a bony cave. Totally, walls, floors, and ceiling are all made out of bone, except for one tiny little opening that is 1/4 of an inch large in an adult. So in a child, it's even smaller. And then that opening is the way all of the mucus exits the sinuses, and the sinuses make 1 pint to 1 quart of mucus per day. So if you have allergies, if you're exposed to pollution, if you have reflux from the stomach, if you're on certain medications, it causes the mucus to get thicker and the swelling of the tissues, and so that opening that was 1/4 of an inch is even smaller, and oftentimes it gets plugged. And then you have a backup of the plumbing. It's not allowed to clean itself. And so nasal washing cleans that doorway, which allows the natural mucus to drain. And usually most humans process that mucus by either swallowing it or coughing it up. Most of us just swallow it, and we never even know that we make all that mucus.
Wow.
But it's very protective. The mucus sort of collects the pollution and then inactivates it in the stomach. So that's why I bet everybody who's listening will remember their mother or grandmother telling them to either sniff salt water when they're sick or put their head in some warm, over a pot of boiling water with a towel. You know, we used to do that years ago. And that is the same reasoning. They knew that a salty water can thin and wash the nasal passages. The problem is, if you use plain salt, it burns.
Mm-hmm.
And so people won't do it if it's uncomfortable. And we have developed a way to make it comfortable. And that's the key for people to doing healthy things, to make it comfortable. If brushing the teeth was painful, we wouldn't brush our teeth every day.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true.
Does
now,
that make sense?
Total sense. Now, it's interesting that nowadays there's millions of people that suffer, like for instance, they suffer from colds and then they get sinus projects or they get allergic rhinitis. And I wonder if there's anything to do not only with pollution but with nutrition. Do you know anything about that?
Yes. I love that question, because when I give lectures, I often talk about 3 ports of entry for the toxins to enter our body. The least important is our skin. The chemicals we put on our skin, it is absorbed into the body, and it adds the toxin load. I always talk about toxic load. The next very important port of entry is the food we eat. And if we eat processed, colored, chemical-laden foods, it too is a huge port of entry for toxins, and now your toxic load is even higher. We breathe 10 1,000 liters of air per day. And there again is where we inhale a lot of our toxins. So if you clean the diet and you clean up the poisons that you put on your skin and you clean your nose on a regular basis, you dramatically decrease the toxic load.
So the basic function of the sinuses is to help us get clean of toxins. Is that the main function of the sinuses?
Well, the sinus is the main function. We don't really know. But we do know that it produces a lot of mucus, which helps protect us. The reason that it's really an empty cavity, and I should say there are 4 sets of sinuses in the human head. 2 sets are in a newborn baby, and over the years, the baby develops the other 2 sets. But the most commonly infected sinus cavity is the maxillary sinus. And it actually helps give us our voice quality, and it also lightens the weight of our head. If it was a solid cavity, solid with bone, our voices would be very different, and we wouldn't be able to carry our head around. So it's basically an empty cavity surrounded by bone.
Wow. And where are the other sets of sinuses?
There's one set behind the eyes. There's one set sort of behind the nose, the nasal bridge between the eyes. And then the other set is in the forehead. Those are the frontal sinuses.
And the nasal cleansing helps to clear which one of those sinuses?
Another great question. You're good at this. So nasal cleansing cleans forgive the medical term, the osteomeatal complex. And that is, if you think of it as a intersection of highways, it is where the frontal and the maxillary sinuses drain. So if you clean the intersection, it allows the maxillary sinus and the frontal sinuses to drain naturally. The other 2 sinuses are very difficult to clean. They don't get infected as often, but when they do get infected, it's a really tough question because no nasal washing will clear that. So the best thing is to avoid that kind of infection by washing daily.
So how can you differentiate between the maxillary congestion and the other ones?
It's mostly doctors do it on the clinical picture. That means if you came to see me, I would ask you questions about where it started, where the discomfort is, what your symptoms are, and as I examine you, I would be able to tell which ones are involved. I would guess, I would predict a certain set of sinuses are involved, but the only way to know with 100% certainty is to do a CAT scan, but nobody would do that because of all the radiation involved.
Yeah. Now, it seems that the sinus project symptoms and the allergic rhinitis symptoms are very similar. What's the difference between one and the other?
In name, if the person has mostly nose issues, and it's always related to the exposure to allergens, and they get congested and they get stuffy and drippy just in their nose, the doctor calls it allergic rhinitis, allergy of the nose. But in reality, Gloria, you've heard that American saying the hip bone is connected to the knee bone. To separate it, if somebody has allergic rhinitis, you can bet that the sinus opening is congested, and probably the sinuses are a bit congested as well.
Now, yesterday I saw a client that has suffered from this allergic rhinitis basically all his life. He's 24. He suffered from this kind of discomfort, I would say. And, he's tired of it. He's tried antibiotics. He's tried all sorts of chemical medicine, and it has not really helped him heal and overcome. would people that have suffered this on a long-standing time, would they benefit from a nasal cleansing and be able to get healed from this project just through the nasal cleansing, or you think it would be good for them to take care of their diet and maybe do a intestinal cleansing as well so they can get all the toxins out of their system?
I think that it is silly to think that an antibiotic would fix the cause. Antibiotics are only used to treat an infection. So it will never go to the root of the problem. Nasal cleansing has been shown with many studies. If you use the correct salt mix, for example, a hypertonic and buffered, which means very salty, but it doesn't burn, that mixture has been shown to remove 80% of the allergens in the nose as compared to, for example, Medi salts.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that if your client that you saw yesterday was using a good nasal wash twice a day, he would be removing at least 80% of the troublemakers.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he cleans his diet, then over time his body will not be so sensitive to those allergens. When he's exposed to those allergens, it won't tip him over into becoming very symptomatic.
Now, is it the sinus projects or the allergic rhinitis, is this an immune deficiency involved problem?
It is an immune problem, but not a deficiency, an overreaction, a hypersensitive reaction.
Okay.
So if I'm allergic to pollen and I'm exposed to pollen, it causes a reaction in my body where the histamine breaks up the cell, and it causes swelling and congestion and excessive mucus and dry, thicker mucus, where so that would be helpful. What happens is, if I'm allergic to pollen and I clean up my diet, then the next time or a few weeks later, if I'm allergic to pollen, I will not be as sensitive.
Mm-hmm. What do you
Sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Now, I have seen, and I believe I was sharing with the audience what happened to me with the Sinus Project and using your product and also doing the vaporizations with eucalyptus and ear candling that also helped me to clear everything. And now I believe I'm healed because I don't have that choking thing in my throat. Now, do you believe that we don't need necessarily antibiotics to be healed from the sinus projects or the allergic rhinitis?
Well, definitely not from allergic rhinitis. You should only use an antibiotic if you have a definite infection. But I would love to tell your audience that there's another study, and I can share the link if anybody would like to read it. They looked at thousands of patients who had documented bacterial overgrowth in their sinus cavity. And they took that large population, and half of them were treated with an antibiotic, and the other half were taught how to do nasal irrigation. 80% of the people who did nasal irrigation were perfect in 3 weeks without the antibiotic.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. And why is that? I believe it's because if you allow the body to naturally drain the sinus cavity, then the body takes care of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can send me through the email, maybe the link, I would love to post it on our Facebook and our webpage and everything for people to know and read about it, because sometimes, skepticism comes and says, no, this is an infection. And we have been taught that if you have an infection, you need antibiotics.
No. In fact, 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was in medical school, that was the belief. But now we know, even ear infections in children, unless the baby is, within 3 months of being born, unless they have a high fever, let's say a 5-year-old who has ear congestion and they go to the doctor and the ear looks red when the doctor looks in, that child does not need an antibiotic.
So how would you treat those ear infections?
How what?
How would you treat the ear infection?
With cleansing.
With the nose cleansing.
If you think about it, if you fall on your knee and you get a muddy cut, if you wash the mud away from that cut and you keep it clean, it will heal from the inside out without an antibiotic.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave the mud on the cut, the infection will go in and the area will spread, it will get red, it will get tender. That's much like the ear infections. The inner ear tube, and I've written about this in my new book, Clearing the Air One Nose at a Time. If you clean the nose, and in the back of the nose is the ear drainage tube called the eustachian tube. So if you clean that, when somebody has the eustachian tube filled with bacteria, mucus, and infection,
mm-hmm.
it allows the eustachian tube to drain naturally.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's because we're connected. Our 5 senses are connected somewhere in the back of our face. And so I imagine that by doing the cleansing, the nasal cleansing, it's going to help not only the ears, but also the throat and the eyes. Yes.
In fact, there's a study looking at the eyes drain. When you cry, you often have a runny nose because the tear goes down the lacrimal duct and drains into the nose.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're exposed to, let's say you're allergic to grasses and you mow the lawn,
mm-hmm.
The pollution that goes into the nose then goes up the lacrimal duct and makes the eyes itch.
Mm-hmm.
So cleaning the nose cleans the ears, cleans the lacrimal duct of the eyes, cleans the sinuses, and cleans the throat. It also reduces, if anybody has asthma, it reduces the number of episodes and the amount of medications one needs for asthma.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned something about the salt, the kind of salt that should be used. Because a girl, a listener wrote me and she said, "Oh, do you think I can do the cleansing with chamomile water and grain salt?" And I said, "Ouch. The grain salt must probably going to hurt." But, you mentioned that it has to be a specific kind of salt. Can you mention, because a lot of people use the table salt, to do the cleansing.
You should never use table salt because it has iodine.
It has iodine. So what kind of salt is the adequate to do the nasal cleansing?
Well, in the old days, you can use, they would use anything, really. But because I have always been focused on trying to make this so comfortable
mm-hmm.
and effective, we use a pharmaceutical grade sodium chloride, which is a very, very, very fine particle. There's no trace elements in it. It's just a pure salt, same that's been used in the operating room for 40 years. And then we add a very high-grade buffering, which allows people to use it very salty, but it is so buffered that it doesn't burn. And when you use this mix, It's soothing, but it also kills germs. It removes 80% of the allergens. It shrinks swollen membranes. It thins the thick, sticky secretions. And it improves the little filtering of the hairs 17%.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really, really amazing. And do you think that this solution can be improved in order to take not 80% but 100% of the allergens?
That's interesting. Well, we'll have to work on that. But what we know is that you are not as sensitive if you start eating the healthy foods and you do other cleansing.
So what kind of foods would need to be avoided for somebody that wants to get healed from this kind of projects of, either the sinus projects or the rhinitis?
That is really a specific to a person. Mm-hmm. I can list common things, but each person is different. If somebody, in my practice and in my life, I have found that if somebody is allergic to airborne, for example, tree pollen or ragweed or other airborne allergens, mm-hmm. then they are most likely allergic to some foods. The common foods are wheat,
sugar,
nuts. The list is very long, and it really depends on the person. Mm-hmm. If they've never had soy, then and they drink a lot of milk, then most likely they have developed an allergy to milk. Mm-hmm. And they can use soy as an alternative. If they were raised on soy and they're tested, it could be that they're sensitive to soy. So in general, the best way to approach it, if you're not going to get tested by a blood test by your doctor, is to start eating a very wide variety of fresh and unprocessed beans and grains and fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have heard that certain nutrients or certain kinds of foods, like milk-based foods, all the cheese or milk or even yogurt, they tend to produce a lot of mucus in the body.
Right.
So it would be good to take all the milk products out if you want to kind of get better with the situation.
True. I agree with you. You are correct.
How about sugar?
Sugar?
Yeah.
So, sugar is another issue in terms of it's not as allergenic, but it's not good for you. Unprocessed or processed sugar is not healthy. It's an empty calorie. It's not nutritious. It gives you a fake feeling of being full, and therefore you don't eat the apple because you ate the cookie, But so sugar is something, simple sugars is what we call those, should be avoided except on occasion.
Mm-hmm. So basically, if people start eating more natural, not processed foods. Now we have all these shelf life products that, very long life shelf products that are very unhealthy, but they are there for people to eat, and most people don't even look at the labels of what they're buying. So the best option you are suggesting, of what I'm hearing, is go and start eating fresh vegetables and fruits and grains, and leave the wheat and the milk products on the side because they're not good. Mm-hmm.
And what I have found over and over and over again is if you do that, and then weeks or months later, if you cheat and have a little wheat pizza, it's not going to push you over the edge. But you have to clean up your diet in general on a daily basis, and then on occasion, enjoy, have the cookie. But you can't have a cookie for 3 meals.
Yeah, exactly. And how about alcohol? People that enjoy wine or beer with their meals, that does have an impact on the overall mucus production in the body or the overall health, to sustain a good health?
Yeah. Well, there's so many studies out recently who look at, I'm going to radio. There are so many studies that look at alcohol, and some people say, you know, red wine is good, and a little bit of this. And I am not sure at the end of the day what we will know 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I know with 100% certainty.
Yeah.
In moderation, we can do almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
An occasional wine, an occasional beer, who cares? But to have 3 bottles of beer every night, that's probably not good for you.
Mm-hmm. So I have
Really know the answer to the question.
Yeah, exactly. Moderation is the key. Now, I have cases, I know you're a pediatrician, and I have cases of a mother that wrote me that has a 3-year-old that has mucus and congestion all the time. What would you suggest a 3-year-old can do? I mean, what the mother can do to help the 3-year-old get over this congestion, constant congestion?
Well, the first questions I would ask is I would ask the parent to look at the immediate environment. What's in the house? If there's a cat, if the child has reflux symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Reflux from the stomach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's in the environment that's contributing? And then I would look at the diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she told me, the child was drinking milk, regularly, and so I suggested to get the baby off the milk. Because that's another the cliche that we have. Oh, kids have to drink lots of milk so they get strong, but milk is very acidic in the organism, so why feed them that? It's like,
that's right.
What alternatives can they give the children?
And when you recommend taking them off the milk, you also have to remind the parent that cheese is part of that. If you clean up their environment in the house and you make sure that it's not reflux, then you can pretty much assume that it's an allergic issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so cleaning up the diet, cleaning up the environment, and cleaning the nose.
How do you clean
up? And on my
your...
website, there are videos on how do you teach a 2-year-old to wash their own nose.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'll let them know that you have those videos. Because that was the question. How do I make 3-year-old clean their nose, or a 2-year-old? But if you have that video over there, I'm going to have them see it.
So they love it. You have to. That's what I'm an expert at. If you put a 3-year-old child in front of me, I can get them to wash their nose with lots of fun. It's a fun project. It's not a torture. It's not a punishment. And they have to do it. So, you could play games with them. There's lots of different suggestions that I have. But adults who've never washed their nose, Gloria, assume it's going to be painful and torture for the child. Mm-hmm. If the adult has washed their own nose and they feel comfortable doing it, then you and I know how telepathic children are.
Mm-hmm.
If they know that you feel comfortable doing it and they watch you do it, they would be more prone to try on their own.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have another question regarding people who have congestion in their noses because they have their nose, the cartilage in their nose is deviated a little. What can be done in the case of people who don't want to have the surgery to get their cartilage taken care of?
Oh boy, you know what? What's very interesting about that question is that I think, first of all, Gloria, I think you would agree with me that every human being has one hand larger than another, one foot is slightly different than the other, and ears, nose, and throat doctors, if you go to them and they look in your nose, if the septum, the part that splits the two nostrils, If it's not perfectly in the middle, they diagnose you as deviated septum.
Mm-hmm.
And it is usually not a surgical requirement. Now, if I'm a football player or a wrestler and I've had my nose broken 7 times, that's a different story. But if you tend to have congestion on one side more than the other, and you have a slight deviated septum, nasal washing will take care of the congestion on that one side.
Mm-hmm.
I personally would not let somebody do surgery on my nose if washing would solve the problem alone.
Mm-hmm.
Why would anybody go under the knife unless absolutely necessary?
Exactly. Yeah. And so this is that's one of the questions of people that had when I mentioned I was going to interview you, and they were, saying, I have congestions, I have this, how do you say the deviation of the what? You said the septum? What was it?
septum. It's the name of the cartilage.
Okay, there you go.
The 2 nostrils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's been interesting because they gave me some interesting questions for me to place to you that I might not consider because I don't have that issue. But so it's interesting because there's this is a case for many people that have this situation, and they don't know how to approach it. And so let me clarify. When you have a deviated septum, the wall, the partial wall that separates one nostril and another nostril, mm-hmm.
so it's leaning over a little bit more to one side. So that's not a problem. But if you have congestion on top of that, then the opening gets even smaller because
mm-hmm.
the wall is leaning a little bit. So washing is even more important.
Okay, now, like for instance, I have never washed my nose until I had the sinus project this summer. I never in my life had the need to wash it, or so I thought. With the kind of world we're living, full of pollution in every way, food pollution, you mentioned something that I didn't consider was the skin, the things we put on the skin that can cause congestion and create the toxins in our body. That's really helpful for me to know. But is this something that everybody should do, or is this something that anybody that has a tendency to have difficulty with their congestion in the nose need to do?
Boy, you give me great questions, Gloria.
How fun.
So here's my answer. Or I'm going to let you decide what the answer is. But number one, it's easier to learn how to wash when you're not congested. Number two, we breathe 10,000 liters of air per day, which includes pollution and allergens and viruses. Does it make sense to brush your teeth only when you get a place that's sensitive and you think you have to go to the dentist, and so you better start brushing your teeth because you have a dentist appointment? Or is it better to learn how to take care of your teeth when they're healthy, to keep them healthy, and when you go to the dentist, it's only for prevention?
Mm-hmm.
It is my humble opinion that because humans live in a different world, if we were talking about 300 years ago and we didn't have so many chemicals and pollution and we ate from the gardens that we grew our food from, I don't think we have to wash our nose every day.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't live in that world anymore. So, for example, during cold and flu season, influenza can be a deadly virus. And we know that washing the nose on a regular basis during cold and flu season greatly reduces the number of infections one develops.
Mm-hmm.
So it is my opinion that you should clean the filter every day so you don't get sick. But the way humans are programmed, Gloria, most humans will only start washing when they get a problem. And to be honest, my experience over the last 30 years is then when they get better, they put the nose wash away until the next time they get sick. And on the third episode of illness, excuse me, then they start using it every day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's what happened to me. When I was okay, I stopped using it for every single day, and now I use it maybe once a week. Because that's how we are. It's like, I feel okay, I don't need that. But because we are not programmed to do preventive medicine. We are the kind, even I do preventive medicine, but even I have been programmed to use it when I get sick, which is not good. I mean, we have to reprogram ourselves for the benefit of preventive medicine and start actually using it more often. Do you think every day is good enough, or can it be every other day, or at least twice or three times a week for anybody that's healthy?
2 times a week is better than not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like brushing your teeth 2 or 3 times a week is better than not brushing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to point out something else, because somebody in your audience may be thinking, is it healthy to wash your nose every day, or are you removing the good protective mucus?
Yeah.
And my answer is, it's very healthy to do it every day. And why? Because at least NasoPure, my nose wash system does not enter the sinus cavity. It does not take the garbage that's in your nose and push it into the sinus cavity like the neti or some other nose washes.
Mm-hmm.
NasoPure is designed to go along the nasal floor, and it actually vacuums or encourages a natural drainage of the sinuses. So in that regard, it's healthy to do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not removing any of the protective mucus inside your sinus cavity.
Mm-hmm.
You know who uses nose washes every single day? Those who have had surgeries and they don't want to go under the knife again.
Uh-huh.
Those who've had 3 or more infections and realize that nasal washing will prevent them. And children who get into the habit of doing it just like they brush their teeth,
mm-hmm.
those people then grow up washing their nose regularly.
It's like we never learned that washing the nose was as important as brushing our teeth. This is so interesting because we have so many bad habits that come from being lazy that
and being modern, yes.
Yeah, that we have never thought that breathing is the basis of our lives, and most people that are unable to breathe because they have congestion, they live in anxiety, they live in a nervous tension all the time because they are not breathing enough oxygen for them to feel calm. And so how can we have not learned the importance of nasal cleansing when breathing is the basis of our life?
I think, I don't know the answer, but I think it's because everybody who's alive today, almost everybody who's alive today, has had the benefits of modern medicine. And we've been trained, oh, my elbow hurts, I'll go to the doctor and take a pill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my stomach hurts, I think I'll go to the doctor and get a pill. Instead of looking at, why did the elbow hurt? Why did your stomach hurt? Before antibiotics in the mid-1900s were developed, before then, nasal washing was actually fairly popular. And we know from the Buddhists from thousands of years ago, they were doing nasal cleansing daily before they meditate because they knew it helped enhance breathing. But Gloria, you mentioned something about people who cannot breathe and who suffer. Those people then snore. And when you snore, you don't sleep in a deep, restorative, deep REM sleep. And so when they wake up, or in the middle of the day, they get sleepy. So children and adults who snore due to congestion are known to not function as well in school. They eat more because they're sleepy and they want to stay awake. And they don't perform at their work as well.
Yeah, because, I mean, the brain consumes so much oxygen, and if they're not getting enough oxygen, they're not going to be able to be clear in their head. No, this is just amazing how everything works together and how we are built in such a very magical way. But, you know, we take for granted.
We have to respect it, right? We have to respect that temple that we were given.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that the main attitude that we have is that we take our bodies for granted, as we take life for granted, and we don't take care of it. We live in this world, modern world, where we're so busy trying to make money to survive and to get our needs met through the money issue, and we have forgotten how to really live.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But now we're fixing that, right? You and me and whoever else wants to join the bandwagon.
Yeah, that's so true. And so, you know, we are glad that we're going to have your products over here and available for people. And you know, it was so helpful for me. You know, I really was so glad to be able to contact you, and that you answered me when I suggested that we can do this interview, because, you know, it's going to be so helpful for so many people to find this very easy way. You know, it took me like four times before I understood how the thing works. I mean, you know, I put it in my nose, but it would go through my throat, or I thought I was doing it wrong, and so, until I, you know, after a couple times I did it right. But it was amazing to see how the cleansing was happening and how the mucus was draining from my nose, and I was so astounded to see what was coming out. That it's amazing. It's really amazing to feel great and be able to breathe. That was the key for me. You know, since breathing is so important.
Gloria, you know what I have found is that most adults, because we have memories of being pushed into the swimming pool and whatever, we assume it's going to be uncomfortable. And so that's why my instructions are so detailed, but it's very difficult to learn a process just by words. If you were to watch somebody do it and then they talk you through it, it's easier. But you know what I want to point out is that in my experience, anybody under the age of 10 or 12, you give them the bottle and they do it automatically. They know how to hold their breath, and they do it perfectly on their own. But as you get older, you have so many life experiences that taint you from just being open-minded as much. So adults need to be trained. Children do it instinctively.
This is amazing. Yeah, they do it instinctively, and we better show them and give them this opportunity before they are corrupted by society and the world. Well, thank you so much for the time you've given me and giving all the audience. And, you know, I will put your webpage so people can find out how to use the product and how to benefit from it. We, you know, appreciate it so much. And I hope we can keep going on with this kind of, you know, experiences to help other people and find a good way to live in this world.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
And if you ever want to do this again or you have more questions, feel free to let's arrange another time.
Wonderful. We'll do that. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be in contact again some other time.
All right. You enjoy this day.
You too. Thank you very much. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.